Today is Friday, July 17th, 2020. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we have lost one of our greatest civil rights lions. The Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian passed away today at the age of 95. We have a special digital home going for him. We will talk with Bernice King, the daughter of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, of course, C.T. Vivian served as one of his lieutenants. We'll also talk with Diane Nash, with Bernard Lafayette, Reverend James Lawson, founder of the Nashville Movement, John Hope Bryant, a number of people we have lined up to celebrate him, including Ambassador Andrew Young. You do not want to miss that. Plus, you don't want to miss the one-on-one interview I did with him. Trust me, it's an amazing interview. Ahmaud Arbery's killers have decided to plead not guilty. We will, of course, talk about that. Plus, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is suing Atlanta Mayor Keisha Bottoms, not just the city, personally. Secretary Pompeo gives his thoughts on the New York Times 1619 project. We'll show you how stupid and idiotic he is. And the Defense Secretary has decided to officially ban Confederate flags from military bases. Take that, Donald Trump. We're also joined on the show by Ambassador Susan Rice. Of course, she, is on the short list to be VP for Joe Biden. She will also talk about racism as a national security threat, as well as on the show, Fulton County DA Paul Howard will update us on the Rayshard Brooks case. He also is facing a tough runoff for his seat. Folks, we have a jam-packed show. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling.
three Georgia man who killed 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery pleaded not guilty today. Travis McMichael, his father, Gregory McMichael, have been charged with murder and aggravated assault. Their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan, who recorded the killing, has been charged with felony murder and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. A judge will decide if the case moves to trial or it gets dismissed. Now, speaking of what's happening in the court cases, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is being sued by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp over the city's mask mandate. Kemp claims that the measure is violating his emergency orders. This is what he tweeted. This lawsuit is on behalf of the Atlanta business owners and their hardworking employees who are struggling to survive during these difficult times. Moments later, Bottoms responded, tweeting, 3,104 Georgians have died, and I and my family are amongst the 106,000 who have tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, I have been sued by Governor Kemp for a mask mandate. A better use of taxpayer money would be to expand testing and contact tracing. Hashtag ATL Strong. Wow. Let's bring in our panel. Certainly join us this week. Rob Richardson, host of Disruption Now podcast. Derek Holley, president, Reaching America, and political analyst. Rob, what the hell? Seriously? We are in 137,000 Americans have died. We are seeing record cases. Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Arizona. We are trying to stop a pandemic. I totally understand. I am a small business owner. I totally get that. But how much use is it to have a business stay open when you're dead and your employees are dead or seriously ill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry I laughed, but you have to laugh to keep from crying or just going off. But, you know, this Governor Kemp, is in the race to be one of the most stupidest governors we have, and that's saying something because we got a lot of stupid governors that are following. I mean,
it's
really
a lot of. I mean, it's like a lot of competition between Ron DeSantis, Tate Reeves, and Greg Abbott in Texas.
It is. I don't know who's going to take it, but right now I say Kemp is leading. He's really stupid. And here's the thing: like, let's even talk about this from an economic point of view. If you don't solve the virus, you don't solve the economics. Most people are not coming out if they don't feel safe. So all this effort to say that you're acting on behalf of business is not even true. But more importantly, lives are more important than property. So if we actually had a competent government right now, we don't. That would be happening now, and businesses would get the support that they need. But instead, we have some fake war on science. This is reality. We are in a pandemic, and the United States of America has failed leadership, no leadership, and we're deciding to engage in stupidity. This is stupid as hell. It's dumb.
Derek, I'm not trying to pick on your fellow Republican governors.
I am.
But Derek, seriously. But Derek, seriously, here's the deal. Okay? If Gavin Newsom was doing stupid stuff, I'm gonna rip him.
He has.
If Cuomo was doing stupid stuff, I'm gonna rip him.
He has.
But what we're dealing with here, the evidence is clear. It's abundant. And I thought Republicans cared about local control. I thought they hated big government.
Then why is she telling everybody she got to wear a mask? Why is it a law to wear a mask? We should be responsible enough to wear a mask if you want to.
No.
Let me finish. You finished.
No.
Let me finish. Here in Maryland, it's not a law that you have to wear a mask. However, they do ask you before you come into a store to please put on a mask. And it's left up to your discretion whether to do so or not. You shouldn't have to find an individual, threaten to put him in jail in order to wear a mask.
Yes, you can.
Now, this lawsuit and everything.
No, but yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I don't get with that.
No, yes, you can.
Don't tell me I have to wear a mask.
Yes, you can.
You do. If you're going to hang around, wait a minute.
Hold up. Wait a minute. If I tell your ass to wear some shoes and a shirt for service, guess what?
That's different. Guess what?
Wait.
Tell me to wear no mask,
Hold up. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold up, Derek. 1 second. Hold up. Derek. If I gotta require Derek, 1 second. If I gotta require you to wear shoes, I can't require you to wear a mask.
You're gonna tell me yesterday I rode my bike 42 miles. You telling me I gotta wear a mask when I go cycling? If I run 6 miles,
That's not what they said. That's not what you're saying. You're making a faux argument.
Hell no.
You're making a faux argument. No, nobody's saying if you're outside riding a bike that you have to wear a mask. If you're going to be around people, hold on. If you're going to be around people indoors,
one second, Rob.
That's what she's saying.
No, Rob.
No,
one second.
No, if you're going to be indoors, we're not saying you're outside.
Derek, hold on. Rob, then Derek, go.
Okay. Listen, if you're outside, the virus dissipates in a large outside area. And you're not by people, you don't have to wear a mask. No one's saying that. What you're saying, if you're going into facilities, you're going into an event where you're going to be around a lot of people, you spread the virus. That's all. We want to stop spreading the virus. Like, why is this a fight with science? I don't understand this. Like, what is this?
Now, Derek, let me ask you a question. Derek, let me ask you a question. Derek, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is located in Georgia, one second. Well, clearly, Brian Kemp isn't quite sure. If the head of the CDC says, if we can get all Americans to wear a mask for the next 2 months, we can completely get this under control. That's what the head of the CDC said. No, that's what he said. I'm quoting him.
She's saying that she wants anybody who leaves the house to put on a mask. That means if you leave your house, because I think it's ridiculous for individuals to be sitting in their car with the windows up by themselves with a mask on. So you're telling anybody who leaves their house, regardless of what you're going to do, you need to put a mask. Hell no. You ain't going to put no law and tell me I got to do that.
So you're perfectly fine with Brian Kemp's lawsuit.
I didn't say that.
No. I'm asking you a question.
I don't get the lawsuit. I said that early on. But what I am saying is, don't tell me I got to wear a mask.
Yeah, I think it's funny that Trumpers find this as their new movement, wearing a mask. Like, this is their sudden civil rights movement. Like, I won't wear a mask.
This ain't got shit to do with Trump.
Actually, it does.
No, it don't.
Actually, it does.
This is Derek Holland.
No. Actually, it does. The fact of the matter is, what you have here is the people. All of these Republican governors who are in. Excuse me. All of these Republican governors who are in opposition to mask mandates. I'm just going to give you an example, Rob and Derek. I remember that white woman in Texas when Judge Eric Moyer, a brother, told her, ma'am, look, the orders were you need to shut your businesses down to save people. That was the order. She's like, I'm not apologizing. All of these people, these right-wing folks start giving her money, $500,000 raised. Governor Greg Abbott says that was not the intention of my executive order. You can't put somebody in jail. We shouldn't be telling people to wear a mask. What happens? He reopens the state Memorial Day. Cases go up. Guess who all of a sudden says, you know what? We're going to have to require people to wear masks. We might have to shut the entire state down because of coronavirus. The same Governor Greg Abbott. That, Derek, is why they require you to wear a damn mask. No, Derek, they require you to wear a mask because guys like you are so hard-headed.
Did he make it a law?
He said, first of all, listen, you didn't hear what I said. Governor Greg Abbott said, you did not listen to what I said. Abbott said, Derek, let me finish. Abbott said, we are going to have to require people to wear masks. He first...
law.
This is ridiculous. No. It's folk who listen to you who out there catching coronavirus and spreading. No. If you listen to me, you're going to protect yourself. If you listen to me, you're going to protect your family. That's the problem. Rob, well, guess what? And Rob, that attitude right there, Rob, is precisely why cases are spiking. That's why cases are spiking. Rob, that's why cases are spiking. Rob, go ahead. Rob, go ahead.
Listen, you look... All these governors, Governor DeSantis, that said that, there was that one clip where Governor DeSantis was like, well, we're not going to be the new New York. We're not going to do that. You guys all said that, and we have victory. And he opened the state, and they're worse than New York ever was. Data works, and we have to protect people. Like, this is not, at the end of the day, Derek, this is not about me. This is not about you. It's about others. You may not die from it, but you don't want to pass it on to your mother.
Wait, hold up, Derek. You also said that, what Abbott did wasn't the same as Lance Bottoms. Henry, go to my iPad. 1 second. Governor, yes, you did. Governor Greg Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott orders Texans in most counties to wear masks in public. I'm not done.
Did he order it? What is the difference?
There is no difference. It's an executive order operates like a law. What are you talking about?
I can't believe we having a debate. Well, that's a law, and he ordered. It's the same.
If it's in his powers to do it, let me give a little bit of a civics lesson. If it's in his powers to do it by the legislator, and he exercises his power, it operates like the law because he's executing the law under his power as an executive. So yes, it's the law.
Let me get one more. Let me get one more. Henry, go to my iPad. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey issues statewide mask mandate in public spaces beginning Thursday. Derek, you have Republican governors who are realizing we got to keep people safe, but I'm not wearing a mask. I don't have to wear a mask. That's just bullheaded and silly.
No, if I'm going out to ride my bike, Roland, I'm not putting on no damn mask.
To the bike.
Period. If I go running, I'm not putting on no damn mask.
Okay, guess what? You know what? You know what, Derek?
I'm not putting on no mask.
Okay, first of all, Derek, if you're riding in a car, you don't have to put a mask on because you're in the car.
Well, why do people doing it?
This is the silliness, right? Because this is the silliness right here. Here's the deal, people. Everybody who's watching right now, let me tell y'all about another Derek, a top Florida official in Florida. He had the same attitude as Derek, opposing masks. His ass is in ICU right now, critical condition, because he got coronavirus. Also, I told y'all yesterday, Chuck Woolery, he just trashed all his mask mandate. Now his son got coronavirus. Now Chuck has deleted his Twitter account because now he looks like a damn fool by opposing it. So if you want to sit here and oppose it, that's fine. Let me go to my next.
If you want to stop wearing a mask, start wearing a mask so we can stop having to wear a mask. It's really simple. Wear the mask so we can stop wearing them.
Now,
I want to stop too.
Yeah, I would love to stop too, but the bottom line is when you got people who are so damn hard-headed and don't want to pay attention, that's what you got. Let's go to our next story. Secretary Pompeo harshly criticized the New York Times 1619 Project, saying that their underlying message is that, quote, our country was founded for human bondage. Duh. Is a slander on great people. Watch this, fool.
The New York Times 1619 Project, so named for the year that the first slaves were transported to America, wants you to believe that our country was founded for human bondage. They want you to believe that America's institutions continue to reflect the country's acceptance of slavery at our founding. They want you to believe that Marxist ideology, that America is only the oppressors and the oppressed. The Chinese Communist Party must be gleeful when they see the New York Times spout this ideology. Some people have taken these false doctrines to heart. The rioters pulling down statues thus see nothing wrong with desecrating monuments to those who fought for our unalienable rights, from our founding to the present day. This is a dark vision of America's birth. I reject it. It's a disturbed reading of our history. It is a slander on our great people.
Dumbass. The New York Times 1619 Project is an ongoing initiative that re-examines the legacy of slavery in the United States since the first Africans were brought to Virginia. Derek, what history book does that fool read?
I don't know, bro.
No, that's your party. So I'm just saying, I'm like...
No, you can't associate me with everybody in that damn party.
No, I'm just saying, I'm saying that's your party.
But here's the thing, bro. Okay, but here's the thing. I don't know why he made comments. I am as black as you are, and I know my history, and I know where we came from. So I don't understand why Secretary Pompeo made the remarks. It's very questionable, and I don't know why. Our country was founded on slavery, and it's a dark past that needs to be addressed. And until we get to the root of it, we're going to continue to have these problems that we're having out here in the streets right now.
I agree. Well, I agree, and I know why he said it, because he's playing to a base and people that like to believe that these things didn't exist, and they want to paint people that are protesting, that are challenging America as anti-American. This is, as we're honoring the great C.T. Vivian, they said the same thing about him. They said the same thing about Martin Luther King. They said that they were communists. Our government challenged them and actually had the FBI watch over them because they were supposed to be Marxists. This is an old playbook that goes back to the beginning of America. And I just want to say this. When he talks about the dark chapter of America, America does have a dark chapter, as Derek said, and we agree on this. We do. And, Frederick Douglass said it when he talked about the 4th of July. Like, we talk about professing freedom, but we have people in chains. During World War II, when Black Americans were overseas fighting, the Germans who they locked up would go ahead of them when they were actually locked up, and we'd have to sit in the back of the bus while we talk and profess about freedoms. And now when George Floyd was killed, sparking a ongoing collective grievance, the world was protesting to make sure that America is living up to the realities and the ideals that it says it has. So this man is trying to paint a picture that is not true because they want to get people riled up to make people feel like America is under attack. America's not under attack. We're under a revelation, and we need to be clear about who we are and tell the truth.
Derek, go ahead.
I agree with everything you said. But I do not agree with the protest that it's been overshadowed by some individuals, some of these white kids who ain't got a damn thing to do with Black Lives Matter, who care less about our Black lives, who are just tearing up stuff for no reason at all.
Oh, Derek, that's not overshadowing it. That's not overshadowing it. That's what happens when you also. That's not overshadowing it. That's what happens when you also have mainstream media who gives that far more attention. But here's the deal: if you actually look at the totality,
if you set a fire to the Wendy's, how's that more attention? You set a fire to the Wendy's, the white girl where the brother was shot down there. That was a white girl, bro.
I know that.
I'm going to say this. When you judge a movement,
Derek, I'm aware of that. We followed the story. Rob, go ahead.
When you judge a movement by its most extreme elements, that's the talk of the oppressor. That's the talk of people that don't want to see the movement. When you just hold on.
Derek, Rob is talking.
Hold on. When you win, because that's what.
Let Rob finish. Then I'm gonna come back to you, Rob. Then Derek.
So Fox News and others likes to just focus on the most extreme elements. Nobody here is advocating for violence. So we're talking about what's going on. It's not being overshadowed. That's what others like to do in order to distract from it.
Now you can talk. Now, Derek, go ahead.
What y'all don't want to do is admit the problem. Them white people's a problem doing that stuff to the movement. That's all I'm saying. I use that as one example, and you want to put that out as he's using that for the whole movement.
I know. I actually
one example.
Right, and you're making our point. It's one example when there are numerous other folks who have been doing stuff right. You only brought up one. Now, allow me to let's go to our next story. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has officially announced that all displays of Confederate battle flags are banned on U.S. military bases. In his memo, he stated that displays of the American flag, state and territory flags, and the POW MIA flag and unit flags are okay. This is what he said in a tweet. With this change in policy, we will further improve the morale, cohesion, and readiness of the force in defense of our great nation. Derek, the other day, Donald Trump said he had no problem with folks flying the Confederate flag. In fact, he also said that if they changed the name of military bases named after Confederate generals, he would veto it. So clearly you have the defense.
Did you say that? I didn't hear that part.
Now you know you're going to get the tape, so.
Go get the tape. Pull the tape. I mean, I can't do it, man.
So, Derek, why is the standard bearer of your party all of a sudden been the champion of Confederate flags?
I don't know. I can't answer and speak for that, man. Okay? We talked about Confederate flags a couple of weeks ago when I was on this show, and I gave you my position. And so, they need to go. I don't know why President Trump has comments. And you said he made the comments to keep them. So, I got to go with what you said because I didn't hear those comments.
Rob?
Well, he's a racist, and so he wants to get people that he thinks are going to be more likely to vote if he can get their rage up. So he wants to focus on that. He wants to pretend as if the Confederacy is part of their heritage. It is not. Confederacy was around for 5 years. the whole purpose, we know this, was to actually betray the nation. They wanted to branch off. They were traitors to this nation, and they were fighting for a horrible cause, which was to preserve slavery. Period. And he wants to talk about that. He wants to preserve white superiority. That's who this president is. That's who he is.
Well, Derek, this is what Donald Trump said just a couple of days ago to CBS Evening News in exclusive. Listen.
President Trump, back in 2015, you said the Confederate battle flag belongs in a museum. Do you still believe that?
All I say is freedom of speech. It's very simple. My attitude is freedom of speech. Very strong views on the Confederate flag. With me, it's freedom of speech. Very simple. Like it, don't like it, it's freedom of speech.
Would you be comfortable with your supporters displaying the Confederate battle flag at political events?
You know, it depends on what your definition is, but I am comfortable with freedom of speech. It's very simple.
But you understand why the flag is a painful symbol for many people, because it's a reminder of slavery.
Well, people love it, and I know people that like the Confederate flag, and they're not thinking about slavery. I look at NASCAR. You go to NASCAR, you had those flags all over the place. They stopped it. I just think it's freedom of speech, whether it's Confederate flags or Black Lives Matter or anything else you want to talk about. It's freedom of speech.
President Trump, back in 2015, you said
that's Derek. He said it's freedom of speech.
I mean, it is freedom of speech, right? I mean, I don't give a damn about a Confederate flag. I can care less about a Confederate flag, but it is freedom of speech.
It's freedom of speech. But it's a difference when the state sponsors it, okay? So let's get this clear. So it's freedom of speech to have a Nazi flag. Should we do that? Should the state sponsor that? There is no difference in my mind from hanging up a Nazi flag than hanging up a Confederate flag. They mean the same thing, and no state should be sponsoring it. And if you want to do it personally, if you want to be a personal jackass and have it, it is your right, but the state shouldn't be supporting it. That's what we're talking about, Derek.
Okay.
Lord have mercy. We are truly dealing with some stuck on stupid people. Folks, former National Security Advisor Ambassador Susan Rice believes that we are in the middle of two pandemics, coronavirus and racism. She also believes that both are national security threats. She joins us right now. Susan Rice, how you doing?
I'm great, Roland. How you doing?
Oh, you know, sitting here having to deal with stupid people who are 3 blocks away from my office, who reside in the White House, who say truly some of the dumbest stuff in the world. When you hear that nonsense, this refusal to condemn the Confederate flag and then say, oh, the people who are flying it, they aren't thinking about slavery. This is no big deal. It's freedom of speech. And if they want to fly it, you know, at my rallies, okay, whatever. Donald Trump is absolutely, Ambassador, appealing to the most hardcore racist or folks in pushing those buttons. Agree or disagree?
Absolutely agree. I mean, the dog whistle has become a bullhorn, and the blower of that bullhorn is the modern day George Wallace. And, you know, it's that bad. It really is. And, you know, we've got the president expressing much more concern for Confederate monuments and flags than he is for the lives of Americans, over 135,000 of whom have died on his watch because his utter failure to handle the coronavirus. So he's made clear what his priorities are and how he intends to run for re-election, which is by pouring salt in the racial wounds and trying to, you know, divide this country.
When you look at that decision made by the defense secretary, and then you hear the nonsense from Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State. I mean, this is the individual. I mean, it's two contrasts. Secretary of Defense says you can't fly the Confederate flag at military bases. It's just not allowed. Then you overhear Secretary Mike Pompeo just in denial about how this nation was created, as if somehow that we haven't been dealing with racism, slavery, Jim Crow, and still dealing with the vestiges of that. I mean, these are so-called leaders. And these are leaders for the rest of the world. As somebody who's been on an international stage, it has to absolutely drive you crazy to see that as the representation of the United States.
Well, it does rather pain me to see this, to say the least. But, you know, it's actually a really serious challenge because consistent with our values and our leadership in the world, you know, we should be condemning racism. We should be condemning anti-Semitism, homophobia, all of the ways in which discriminatory or autocratic societies abuse the rights of their people. And rather than speaking up and speaking up with moral authority, we're modeling much of that behavior here at home. And at the same time, drastically diminishing our global leadership and our ability to bring other countries and peoples to join with us to deal with challenges that affect our security and our prosperity and well-being. So it's not just about, Secretary Pompeo being insensitive, even though, to put it politely, he is. It's about squandering our leadership in the role and undermining our national security as a consequence.
And when we talk about that, again, after 8 years of President Barack Obama, not only, obviously being the first black president in American history, and that type of diplomacy, to see this, for lack of a better phrase, this thuggish foreign policy, this grotesque display that we see across the world, what are you hearing from foreign leaders who you still talk with? How are they looking at us? How are they viewing this country in this moment of an international pandemic and global financial issues, and you're still dealing with wars and things along those lines? What are they saying about us?
Well, Roland, they're looking at us with dismay and disbelief. They can't believe how far we've fallen so fast. And the coronavirus, which, in normal times, the expectation would be that America would be doing among the best in the world in confronting a pandemic and being of assistance to other countries that have less, that are wrestling with far less developed healthcare systems and structures. Being a leader in stamping out the pandemic around the world, as we tried to do, for example, in 2014, a different scenario, but with the Ebola epidemic. That is our traditional role, rallying the world to deal with a problem effectively and not letting it get out of control here at home. In this instance, under President Trump, we've done absolutely the opposite. We've withdrawn from the global stage. We've taken our marbles and gone home from the World Health Organization, precisely the instrument that is needed to help coordinate assistance to the world's most needy countries. And we have utterly failed and set the worst possible example for how to deal with this virus here at home. The highest infection rates, the largest numbers of deaths, and it's due to incompetence, dishonesty, a failure to follow the science, and increasingly willful neglect. When the president is telling students and our children and their teachers and the staff of schools that he doesn't care about their health, he cares about his reelection, and he views all of this through a political prism, that's when you know that we're in deep, deep trouble. And we truly are. And the world can see that. And they are just hoping that we have the sense to bring sanity back to the White House in 2021.
Your book is called Tough Love. Here we go, it showed Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. If you were sitting in front of a group of red hat wearing MAGA people, what tough love would you give them to say why they should not vote for this man again to be given 4 more years?
Well, look, we need leadership that recognizes fundamentally that at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And we sink or swim in this country between our shores together. Right now, we're sinking, but we don't have to allow that to be the case. Americans of every political persuasion are dying. Americans of every political persuasion are losing their jobs. And what we need is leadership that puts the national interest and the interest of Americans first, regardless of where they live, regardless of how they vote, regardless of what they look like or who they worship or who they love. And we're not getting that right now. We're getting leadership that is choosing to put political self-interest above the livelihoods of all people, regardless of their political background. The president goes to Oklahoma, the heart of red America, and holds a rally without social distancing, knowing that the consequence is going to be death. Now the governor of Oklahoma has COVID, and the rate of infection has spiked in the weeks since the president was there. So how is that helping anybody? And everybody with any sense understands that as long as the infections are raging, we can't sustainably reopen our economy. We can't put people back to work, which is what we all want to do. We all want to send our kids back to school. That's not a red issue or a blue issue. We're Americans. We want to educate our kids. We want them to be safe and have the opportunity to learn. And yet, because of this president who puts himself above everything else, that's not being, it's not been possible. And he's going out of his way to rush through, deny the severity of the disease, pressure school districts, and pressure politicians to follow his deadly lead. And we cannot afford that. None of us can.
When we think about America's standing internationally, the world has always looked to this nation to be a moral leader. Not always been the case. We've been that. Let's say Trump loses in November. What's the first thing that a Joe Biden administration has to do to let the world know that that's now in our past and this is what we have to do moving forward?
Well, Roland, let me answer that, but let me just put the answer in context. I think Americans need to understand that it's not a matter of simply flipping a switch and everything goes, back to a place where our leadership is immediately embraced and all is forgotten. A huge amount of damage has been done. Trust has been broken. People can no longer believe the word of the President of the United States on matters large and small. Everything is a transaction. Our allies are treated like adversaries. Our adversaries are embraced like, family members. It's absolutely upside down. And so as Americans, we need to understand that the first thing we must do is vote for change. And voting for Joe Biden, who has enormous experience, great relationships, the trust and the confidence of the most important partners we have on the global stage, is a critical and absolutely necessary first step. But we will have great work to do over the course of a next administration. And it's not going to all be done in 4 years, maybe not even in 8 years, because Roland, understand that these very countries, particularly our closest partners, our allies in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere, no longer can be confident that what we just did over the last 4 years can't possibly happen again. They have to fear that, that it's conceivable that we could come back to a place like this. So their trust will come back, but it will come back slowly, and it will need to be rebuilt with tangible action. So the first thing that Joe Biden should do as he enters the White House, knock on wood, in January 2021, is to reach out to our closest allies and neighbors, Canada, Mexico, our European partners, our partners in Asia, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and say to them, look, we understand that what has transpired has not been helpful. It hasn't been a partnership based on mutual interest and shared values and mutual respect. It's been bullying and transactional and based on falsehood. That is all going to change. We are back. We honor our alliance commitments. We understand that this is not a protection racket and it's not solely about dollars and cents. It's about our mutual interests and our shared security. And we will be here with you. And then we're going to have to take steps, concrete steps, that demonstrate that commitment. So, for example, we pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement unilaterally after we had negotiated it. We have to go back. We pulled out of various other important agreements like the Iran deal. We have to take a new look at that. But most importantly, we need to be clear with our allies that at the end of the day, they are what matters most to us, because our strength in the world is a function of those alliance relationships. And so, President Trump recently said we're pulling a third of our forces out of Germany unilaterally without ever consulting with the German government. Reversing that step and many others like it is the kind of concrete thing Joe Biden will need to do on day one. Rejoining the World Health Organization, as he said he'll do on day one. That's the sort of thing that signals that we are really back and we mean it.
In your book, Tough Love, Henry, go to my iPad, you write about that last day as National Security Advisor. You lay out the things that you had to deal with. And one of the things you said, I have had to spend many hours on additional tasks briefing my successor as National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. That case is completely unraveled. You see what the Attorney General, William Barr, did. And as somebody who served in that position, as somebody who was ambassador to the United Nations, to watch that and then watch how the DOJ operated and watch how Donald Trump celebrated that and then say, oh, sure, I would hire this person again. I mean, you write about these are positions of public trust. The public has to trust people like you, that you will do things in the best interest of the nation and not personally.
Of course. And, I don't want to get into the specifics of Michael Flynn and his circumstances, but the bottom line is that we need the best and the most committed people of integrity and experience in these critical roles. And that is something that I can promise you Joe Biden will bring. He will bring those that care deeply about this country, who are not in it for personal, financial, or other form of gain, that are there to do the job that the American people trust and expect them to do. And we've time and again seen too often in the Trump administration people signing up for who aren't qualified, who don't deserve the public trust, and who fail to deliver, and whose only motivation is to be acolytes to Donald Trump as he destroys the fabric of our democracy and the integrity of our government. And so that urgently needs to change.
You also talked about that last day writing a particular memo that has been the subject of lots of conversation, assessing Russian activities and intentions in recent U.S. elections. We have less than 120 days. Are you still concerned that Russia will try to impact this election? And does it bother you that pretty much our nation, in terms of leaders, Mitch McConnell didn't move on a particular bill to fortify the elections? Trump doesn't care that even with all this evidence, their whole deal is like, we're fine, we're good.
Yes, Roland, I'm deeply worried about it. Russia has not stopped for a minute trying to undermine and weaken our democracy. It interfered to assist Donald Trump in 2016, but it has been active every day since that election, including in the 2000. But just on every average day, trying to deepen the divisions that exist in American society and pit Americans against each other, causing us to distrust and hate each other and not believe in the integrity of our democratic institutions. The Russian objective is to discredit democracy and weaken the United States. And it can accomplish that goal if it gets on the internet, as it does every day, and argues on every side of every divisive issue, whether it's race or guns or immigration or gay rights, and they're out there spinning truths and falsehoods to divide us. And that is a very serious threat, and that will translate into the same kinds of misinformation, suppression of voter interest, and selling of lies and discredited theories that they did in 2016. I fully expect that in this year, in 2020, and Americans need to be prepared. And yes, it's a travesty that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans refuse to enact legislation that's been sitting on their floor for months to shore up the integrity of our elections and make it much more difficult for Russia or any other foreign player to do what it seeks to do. They won't provide the funding. They won't pass the legislation that would protect our elections. And the only explanation that one rationally can come up with is because they are prepared to welcome that assistance from Russia and other adversaries as long as they feel it's beneficial to them. Again.
A couple of questions about Africa. Here we are dealing 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies are African nations. The population growth from the motherland as well. China, significant investment in African nations. Has this nation dropped the ball in terms of not recognizing what that future could look like? Have we done enough to stand with African nations to help them economically, to work with them? Can we do more?
Yes, we absolutely can do more, and we should do more. And Roland, we should view this opportunity to be better partners with Africa as not a matter of charity or humanitarian assistance, even though there's good motive in doing that. It's in our national interests to have partners in Africa that are growing, that are prospering, that are providing greater freedoms and greater benefits to their peoples. Africa is a vast continent of enormous talent, extraordinary resources, and great potential. And if we are absent or disinterested or under-resourced in our efforts to engage in Africa, we are missing an opportunity. We're missing economic opportunities, we're missing market opportunities, but most importantly, we're missing an opportunity to grow with the talent and the potential of an extraordinary collection of peoples on that continent. And, there's much we should be doing. We should be promoting peace and conflict resolution. We should be shoring up democracy and respect for human rights. We should be opening our markets further to African goods and spurring investment from the United States in Africa, providing more in the way of political risk insurance. We do some of these things, more or less, depending on the administration. We should be, investing in bringing electrification to parts of Africa, training and supporting the development of youth and talent and education, agricultural resources, health, and trying to improve healthcare infrastructure in Africa. All of these things. And yet, in recent years in particular, I think much of our engagement with Africa has been viewed primarily through the prism of competition with China, which is necessary but far from sufficient. And as a result, we have really scaled back our vision and our ambition for what the U.S.-Africa relationship can be.
You are on Vice President Biden's shortlist to be his VP nominee. Most of the folks, obviously, who are being considered are not necessarily talking about it. Our audience, mostly African Americans, got a lot of white fans as well, so we certainly appreciate that. What would you say to Black America if Susan Rice becomes a nominee? What would you say why that matters and what you bring that's important?
Well, Roland, first of all, I have to say it is really humbling and an honor to be among those reportedly being considered for the vice presidency by Joe Biden. And he has an extraordinary list of women, any of whom I think would do a great job in that role. And I think it's going to be very hard for him to go wrong. So everybody brings a different set of skills, experiences, and talents, and they're all exceptional. My experience and what I would bring to a partnership with Joe Biden on behalf of the country is my years of experience at senior levels in the executive branch. For over 15 years, on almost 2 decades, I've worked in the White House and in the State Department and at the United Nations in the top tiers of our federal government. And when I was National Security Advisor, I was responsible for chairing and coordinating the cabinet level committee of agencies that had to deal with every crisis that fell on our plate, whether it was the rise of ISIS or the Ebola epidemic and everything in between. So what I know is how to make decisions, to forge policy out of different agencies with different budgets and different interests and constraints, how to get stuff done. And in a moment when the next president will inherit, assuming it's Joe Biden, a pandemic, an economic recession, a racial justice movement that needs to be fulfilled, and as we've discussed, our plummeting leadership role in the world, the need to have the government firing on all cylinders and being able to address those multiple simultaneous challenges is greater than ever. So my experience is in getting things done at the highest levels of government. I understand national security, foreign policy, diplomacy, obviously intimately, but I also understand many of the domestic issues that will inevitably arise. And I would be honored to be able to assist Joe Biden in whatever capacity he thinks that I can best serve.
You mentioned
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you mentioned the issue of racial justice. That is going to be a significant domestic agenda.
Absolutely.
I have argued that in this moment of the reckoning, we're really operating in what I call the third Reconstruction. And so we're seeing these changes. We're seeing, I mean, it's been 9 weeks since the death of George Floyd, and we've seen significant amounts of change. But really, to deal with the inequality in this country, it is going to take massive reinvestment by this country. A massive plan, some call, an urban Marshall Plan, if you will, to deal with these difficult challenges. Have you thought about that and how major that needs to be, and to keep people focused on that? The first Reconstruction lasted 12 years. The second one lasted 14 years. I mean, this is something that's not going to just one bill, here you go, we're good. There's going to have to be a real commitment, or Dr. King wrote in Chaos of Community, Where Do We Go From Here? He said, it's a check America's going to have to write that it has never really wanted to write before.
Well, Roland, I've thought a lot about it, as many of us have. And, to me, we've had this extraordinary movement following the tragic murder of George Floyd. And thus far, that movement has really resulted concretely only in some flags and some statues being retired. And that's not nearly enough. That is, in my judgment, a missing of this moment. As gratifying as it may be to see the Confederate flag come down from the State House in Mississippi or from NASCAR, that's not what this is about. Systemic racism, in my judgment, requires systemic reform. And whether you call it a third Reconstruction or a New Deal or whatever the terminology you prefer, to me, we need a president like Joe Biden in the White House with the commitment and the vision and the passion to address these systemic requirements. And we need change in the Senate and sustaining the House, because without all three, we're not going to get this done. Look at the Justice in Policing Act, the George Floyd Act, good piece of legislation passed by the House. Do you think Mitch McConnell's going to let that thing go anywhere in any recognizable form in the Senate? No. And there's nothing radical or ridiculous or, even aggressive in that legislation. So that's emblematic of the problem. And to address this moment with a movement worthy of it and results that reflect that movement, we're going to need a sustained package of legislation that deals with all of the inequities, from the lack of jobs and economic opportunity to health care to education to housing, to the environments that we live in that are killing us. All of these things are going to have to come together. And we need to implement them in a way that recognizes that they are born of historic and systemic inequality and racism, but that also brings along all Americans, because it's not only us as much as this moment has been about African Americans. We also have to be mindful of how systematic reform can lift up all of us and reduce the disparities that have become so glaring in our society.
Folks, Susan Rice, the book is called Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. Glad to have you on the show. Look forward to you coming back.
Great to be with you, Roland. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. Take care. All right, folks, let's go to my panelists, Derek Holly and Rob Richardson. Rob, I'll start with you. She's on the short list. Your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, I mean, she'd be a great pick. I think she has a firm understanding of of the moment. She served under President Barack Obama, and she understands the urgency of this moment. Like, there has to be a real bold commitment to the Black community in particular, and then our whole nation. You look at what has to be done. We have to invest. I really like the way you talk about a third Reconstruction. You know, right before the Reconstruction, what was some of the most progress we've ever made in this nation. This is when we got basically the train system. This is when we got land grant colleges. This is when the South, decided to get out of the Union. And during that time, we got a lot of things to move forward. That's just a fact. And so what we're going to need is an investment in a 21st century infrastructure plan, one that invests not only in roads and bridges, but actually broadband. We're seeing that our kids don't have the resources that they need in this post-COVID-19 world. And COVID-19 operated as a short-term disruptor, but a long-term accelerator. It is accelerating the inequalities that are already built in. So we need to make investments in our infrastructure, like broadband, not only to help schools, but to help our businesses. Like, if you don't have high-quality access to high-quality broadband, you're not going to be able to do business. You can't do this. You can't hardly do business now. Everybody does business and networking now by what? By Zoom. If you don't have something quality, Zoom, Skype, you're not going to be able to do business. So we have to really reimagine and have bold leadership, because we've had no leadership in this White House.
Derek Holly.
Yes, Roland.
Your assessment.
The systemic racism that exists in this country.
Your assessment of Susan Rice in terms of her potentially being a VP nominee.
This country has come from both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, the operative word is white.
There you go.
I don't disagree.
And to think that this one white man, Joe Biden, is going to pull America together and get rid of all that's been going on, I think it'd be foolish on anybody's part. And I think we need to take the politics out of it, Democrat and Republican, in order to fix it. That's the only way it can be fixed in terms of what's going on in this country with Black people right now, because it was brought on by white people who are both Democrats and Republicans.
Right, which is why I said to her that this is not going to be just one bill. Okay, it's all done. I said the first Reconstruction was 12 years. The second one was 14 years. We have to look at this in order to deal with the issue. You have to be thinking in terms of 10, 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
Massive reinvestment, not just politically, but also when you talk about foundations, when you talk about corporate. That's why when the conversations that I've had with people, I'm not just interested in this $5 million or $10 million grant. I'm like, no, I'm talking about the creation of $1 to $10 billion funds to be able to deal with this.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would just say with Rob.
Hold up, Derek, then Rob. Derek, go.
I was going to say, Rob, you talked about having broadband and bringing all these services to underserviced, underprivileged communities. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I was on a call on Monday or Tuesday. I sat on about 2.5 hours. It was with our school board in terms of opening school for my son who's got to go back. And they had obviously distant learning, but there was a B part to that. And they wanted kids who were disadvantaged, who had special needs, to come back to school to get face-to-face 3 to 4 days a week.
Okay.
Well, everybody fought against that. Everybody fought against that because it's like we got to do distant learning. But meanwhile, we got these same kids who don't have broadband, who don't have internet, continue to fall behind, and that's a problem.
Rob, go ahead.
It definitely is a problem. And all these people that are just so, I'm not saying this to Derek, but I hear a lot of conservatives out there saying they want kids back, but they're not supporting funding. They don't support funding for schools. Like, take several seats if you're not actually supporting funding because you're not really trying to solve the problem. Second part I will say is that I agree with you that the problem is bipartisan when it comes to racism, that it's structural. What I will say at this moment is, though, there has to be a total rejection of Trumpism. He is a symptom, but he is now taking something, and he's been the leader of trying to divide along race, of trying to embrace white supremacy, trying to make it okay to embrace, Nazism and things like that. He's done these things. So, like, that has to be rejected outright, wholly, not necessarily to elect Democrats, but to show a message that this is not who America is to move forward. Otherwise, they're going to continue to use these methods. So that has to be done for that reason. So in order to have advancement, we need to reject the current environment that is Trumpism. It's not even Republican. I'm going to call it Trumpism, racism. They're using it more than anybody ever has, and we need to say that there is no place for that in America.
All right,
that
folks,
message has to be sent loud and clear.
Our next story, the murder of Rayshard Brooks by Garrett Rolfe, is an ongoing case, and the Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard, is dealing with that, as well as his runoff election for the Democratic nomination. Number of challenges he faces. Also, the decision to, of course, charge cops who attacked those two students when you had the protests. Paul Howard joins us right now, Fulton County DA. Glad to have him back on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Sir, how you doing?
Doing great, Roland. Glad to see you, and really honored to be on the program with Susan Rice.
Indeed. And we also, I want to start this first before we even get into these other cases. You're there in Atlanta. Today we lost an absolute legend, lion, in Reverend C.T. Vivian.
Yes, we did. I spoke with Ambassador Young earlier during the day, and what he said is, he hopes to get to be 96 himself. But it's a great loss. He was a great friend. He has done so much for our community. He's the kind of person that can never be replaced, and all of us are just sad with his passing.
And we're going to, just for all the folks who are watching right now, we're going to be paying tribute to him. We have a number of people who are lined up in addition, and then we're going to be playing the 1-hour interview that I did with him that's absolutely amazing because that's the kind of guy that he was. D. Howard, let me ask you this here. It has been absolutely stunning to listen to all of these police who are now angry. The police commissioner in New York says, we've gone too far. We've taken tools away from cops, which I'm trying to figure out what was taken away. What, banning chokeholds? In Atlanta, all these police officers who were upset because cops were fired in the case where you charged them as well. As a district attorney, look, you have to deal with police. You got cases there. But to me, what offends me as a citizen is this whole notion that the moment a district attorney holds a police officer accountable, the entire police force says, the hell with you, that's wrong what you did, and so we're going to go after you. It is if they cannot be held accountable by anybody. That's bothersome.
And Roland, let me tell you, I believe that's the reason that what we see in this country is a continuous role of African-American men and women and other minorities being killed by the police, because in many ways the police departments are accepting the conduct. They are encouraging the conduct. And I believe that one of the things that we have not done as a country is made a full inspection of police unions. And as you know, the police unions are a very important part of the very kind of culture that you're talking about. That's what we've seen in Atlanta. As soon as we prosecuted the first police officer in 2002, we heard the same refrain. Mr. Howard, you made a rush to judgment. Mr. Howard, what you're doing is political. And we've heard it ever since. And this is what you hear all over the country. But I am glad now that the young people are stepping forward, and what they're saying is, we are not going to continue to put up with this system.
And when you look at the protest and when you look at what's been happening in the streets, when you look at all of a sudden, when people talk about defund the police, they're not saying we're going to just get rid of police departments and fire everybody. What they're saying is shift resources. Everything in the country can't be solved by law enforcement, just like you as the DA. Everything can't be solved by throwing somebody in jail. That's why you have options in terms of whether it's counseling, whether it's rehab, whether it's community service. At some point, this nation has to get out of law and order, throw them away, lock up the key, because you can't afford it.
Well, I think, Roland, already what you've seen is the Republican Party, they've already hijacked the use of the term defund the police department. What people in our communities are talking about, they're not just talking about stripping money away from the police randomly, but what they are saying is the police need standards. They need goals that they have to meet, just like you and I have to meet goals. I think that one of those standards that should be set is that the police should not kill citizens. Suppose we said that in order for you to receive your funding, you have to not kill people. There are many other conditions that we can set for policemen, and if they don't reach those conditions, then I think their funding should be affected. One of the things that we can do, particularly with the this continuous killing of Black and minorities, suppose we said to the policemen that at the end of the year, all of you guys received a 5% raise if you just didn't kill anybody. So this is an opportunity for us to get really creative. But
wow, I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that before, yes.
You got to be creative. And what people are talking about, they're not just talking about throwing policemen out of their communities, helter-skelter. But what people are talking about is restructuring the way that they're funded so that it forces the police to adopt new standards, for them to police differently, to make sure that it's constitutional, that it's nonviolent, and that funding mechanism is an important way of getting it done.
We have seen also a serious attack on progressive prosecutors. Donald Trump has been very clear. Bill Barr has been clear. Pete Sessions before him. There are people, and especially Black district attorneys. We're seeing an increase in those numbers. I mean, I remember when you talk about Black DAs, I remember when Craig Watkins became the first Black DA ever in the history of Texas. And now Dallas County has had 2 consecutive Black DAs. That's something that people are not paying attention to. Have you thought about that? Have you talked about that with your fellow Black DAs across the country? How there is this target on the back of progressive Black DAs or Black DAs, period, who don't want to operate as the way other DAs used to in the past, where essentially they were completely so pro-law enforcement that the community did not trust they could ever really hold law enforcement accountable?
Well, we've talked about it quite a bit because what you've described is a reality. There's been an effort to intimidate the DAs. You know what happened with Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore when she decided to file arrest warrants and indict police officers for killing Freddie Gray. If you look at the DA in St. Louis, who has just been almost not been able to perform her duties. Kim Gardner having to file lawsuits. And people don't realize, Roland, that in retaliation, most of her staff now has joined the police union. I mean, just imagine being the district attorney and that consequence taking place. We know about the DA in Orlando, Florida, who is the governor tried to remove her from handling death penalty and murder cases. So this is something that's been going on over the whole country. And now what people are talking about, let's just remove these guys. Reverend Sharpton mentioned, I was on his show last week, and what he said to me is that you have become the poster child for the Republican Party, used to intimidate other DAs And what they want to say is, we don't want you to prosecute policemen. We don't want you to talk about reform, because if you do, we're going to get rid of you.
Question, Derek Holly, your question for Paul Howard.
My question is, when you talk about, a couple weeks ago, we was on Roland's show, and we talked about Tim Scott's bill that he had introduced in terms of police reform. And in his bill, he had mentioned a lot of the things that you're talking about in terms of incentives for the states. In order for these police departments to change what they were supposed to do, they wouldn't receive funding unless they adhere to some of these standards. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that you would be in agreement with police reform as long as if it was dictated by funding that came federally to these different states. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, absolutely. Could you imagine if somebody hired you as the bodyguard for your family, and while you were the bodyguard, you happen to kill 2 or 3 of your family members? I think one of the first things that people would say is, hey, I can't pay you your salary until you stop killing my family members that I paid you to guard in the first place. I believe it's a very a way that we can now start conversations, but we can also start to require policemen to follow a certain conduct, because we can make it a contractual arrangement based upon funding. And if you don't meet certain goals and certain standards, then that funding would be reduced based upon the failure to reach those standards.
I like that, DA Howard. I like that a lot.
Rob, your question for DA Paul Howard.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for all that you do. I would say, I want to follow up with what Derek said, because I think there's some difference here. I believe you were saying it's much more effective to make sure that we hold police unions and police accountable to get rid of qualified immunity, so you can be held accountable for the actions that you do. Because that's really the argument at the federal level. I want to say that's, most of the funding that happens at the state level. So 2 is that, so 1, from the federal level, do you agree that it's much more effective, and how you really are going to be able to move the ball if you get rid of qualified immunity? You make that clear. If you kill somebody, you go over the line. You don't have to. You're no longer going to have protection of the state just to do that. Second, what do you think we need to do at the local level? It sounds like do we need to push harder on the contractual level specifically? Like, what are some things we have to go after? And 3, how do you think we should frame the narrative? I think defund the police is the wrong narrative to say, because it's so easy to go after. What should the narrative be in terms of how we're framing what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we need to look at the local funding. That's where the funding comes from most police departments. I believe there are about 18,000 of them here in the United States. Their funding doesn't derive principally from the federal government. And so if you're going to make substantial changes, it has to be done locally. I think a better term that we might use rather than defunding is restructuring. Similar to what was done in Camden, New Jersey, they restructured the police department. And I think that's the appropriate term to use in this situation. One of the things that I think that we need to start talking about is to present some permanent changes in our country. And so, Roland, I'm hoping that you'll invite me back so we can talk about, I put together 9 separate changes that we need to make in this country. I've worked with Kim Worthy, who is the DA in Wayne County, an outstanding prosecutor. And what we want to talk about are some things that if Joe Biden is the new president, when he takes office on January the 21st, he ought to start by making some changes with respect to policing in America, because we can't just keep telling people that I'm for you. We need some permanent statutory and policy change.
Well, absolutely. We'll certainly look forward to having you back to talk about and have that conversation. Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. And again, I appreciate being on the same program with Susan Rice.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, sir. Folks, gotta go. Let me first of all thank Derek and Rob for being on our panel today. I certainly appreciate both of you. In fact, let's just do this here. Before I let both of you go, I want to give you an opportunity to, you know what? I'll hold that. Y'all stay right there. Let me go to commercial break. When we come back, we'll celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. Folks, we've got an amazing lineup of people. Diane Nash, Ambassador Andrew Young, Harry Belafonte, so many others to share their thoughts and reflections about one of our civil rights lions, Reverend C.T. Vivian. That is next on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. He was not a large man. He was a small man, very thin, but man, was he one tough SOB. Many of us deeply saddened today to hear of the passing of civil rights legend, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. It is it's very hard for us to have to report this story. Lived an amazing life, dying of natural causes at his Atlanta home. Cordy Tyndale Vivian always had an absolute great smile on his face from ear to ear, but man, was he tough as he battled and faced down Jim Crow. Just an amazing, amazing man. He worked alongside Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He participated in freedom rides. In 1947, he participated in his first nonviolent protest, a lunch counter sit-in in Peoria, Illinois. He was one of the founders of the Nashville Christian Leadership Conference, an affiliate of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In 1965, Vivian became the director of national affiliates for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when he led a group of people to register to vote in Selma, Alabama. He has done so much and left a legacy and his mark on the country. President Barack Obama awarded Vivian the highest civilian honor from the nation, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, in 2013. This was that ceremony.
Reverend C.T. Vivian. Equipped only with courage and an overwhelming commitment to social justice, the Reverend C.T. Vivian was a stalwart activist on the march toward racial equality. Whether at a lunch counter, on a freedom ride, or behind the bars of a prison cell, he was unafraid to take bold action in the face of fierce resistance. By pushing change through nonviolent demonstration and advocacy, C.T. Vivian established and led numerous organizations to support underserved individuals and communities. His legacy of combating injustice will shine as an example for generations to come.
Joining us right now to pay tribute to his longtime friend and colleague is Ambassador Andrew Young. Ambassador Young?
How you doing?
Man, it's always good to talk with my frat brother. We lost a good brother in the civil rights, a good alpha. And I said at the top, C.T. Vivian was a tough SOB.
He was, but he had one of the biggest hearts and biggest brains and smallest egos in the civil rights movement.
And
he was selfless, and he never did anything to promote himself. He was always mindful of the needs of others and the cause that he had devoted his entire life to. You know, I just counted up that he started in 1947. That was, 8 years before Rosa Parks was. And he went to Nashville somewhere around 1960 and started working with the Nashville sit-in movement when he was actually an employee of the Baptist Publishing House, the National Baptist Publishing Company. And that's where I first met him, about 1960 in Nashville.
The thing that I had a chance to sit down with him in 2017. Every time I would go to events, I would see him, would definitely give a hug. He was so appreciative, and I would always just thank him for his work. And when y'all were in St. Augustine, when y'all caught hell there, he was right there.
He was, and he stayed there to the end. And that was really the bloodiest and most brutal movement that I was in, or that I know about. Now, that doesn't count the Freedom Rides. But the Freedom Ride, it went on in St. Augustine for almost 2 weeks, every day. And people just confronted the Klan. What we didn't know then that we learned later on was the sheriff deputized the Ku Klux Klan to try to keep us down.
Well, one of the things that was interesting, and for our viewers, you're going to be able to see this later when you see my interview with him, Ambassador Young. He talked about there being where y'all went to Integrated Beach, and this cop jumps on his back and drags him underwater. And he said his first thought, he just started laughing. He's like, well, if I'm going to go to the Lord, might as well go now. And that didn't happen. But he said literally he just started laughing. I said, are you serious? He's like, yeah. And then he said, look, he made it clear. The moment he started in this fight, he said, I am prepared to die for the freedom of black people.
And he was. And he was consistent for 70 some years. And he just weakened about 2 weeks ago. He has been active, mentoring young people in his C.T. Vivian Institute. And he, C.T. was the kind of fellow that stayed in shape too. He and Jimmy Carter are the only two people I know that are were the same weight at 95 as they were when they graduated from college.
You're absolutely right, because he
and I can't make that statement.
No. You and I can't make that statement. No, we enjoy gumbo too much.
He used to go to Morris Brown on his way home from work, from the office, and run up and down the steps to stay in shape in the stadium. And he never lost his mental acuity, and he read constantly, and was just and was a loving, faithful husband, and has some great children.
Well, he absolutely just an unbelievable man. And you're right. Hey, I would go to events and CT was moving fast. He was walking. He was full of energy. And he said, I'm going to keep on going till I can't go anymore.
That's right.
Ambassador Andrew Young, it's always great to talk with you. I hate that a lot of times under these circumstances, unfortunately with coronavirus, we can't have our usual homegoing services, when Reverend Lowry passed and others. But at least with modern day media, with digital, we get a chance to celebrate folks like Reverend C.T. Vivian and share the memories, and a whole new generation can truly learn about great figures like himself, you, and others.
Very good. And we don't die. We just move on to another era.
There you go. Great words. Ambassador Young, tell your wife hello.
And Joe Lowry and Jose Williams are still with us because we still call it their name.
That's right. That's right. We are.
Okay.
Tell your wife hello, sir.
God bless you.
All right, brother, take care. Folks, Bernard Lafayette worked in the civil rights movement. He's a human rights activist, co-founder of SNCC. Bernard, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Brother, always good to see you and talk with you. We truly lost a warrior in Reverend C.T. Vivian.
Yes, this is absolutely true. And we had a special relationship because our birthdays are only one day apart. And I've already bought his birthday card for July 30th. But we had a special relationship because we love to do things together. Actually, CT, when I met him as a student at the American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee, he used to substitute for Reverend Kelly Miller Smith, Sr., as a homiletics professor. So CT was teaching, preaching, in other words. And when Kelly Miller Smith was not available, he did do that. And when you had the sit-ins, we looked around at our student body, and there was John Lewis and Jim Bevel and C.T. Vivian, and we all were right there together. It was just, couldn't be a coincidence. It was by divine providence that we were all right there together, and John Lewis. And so we started learning about the movement with Jim Lawson teaching courses and stuff like that, and CT with all of his experience and background. How is it that you could be in jail with your professor? Yeah, we were. Mm-hmm. On the Freedom Rides, we were in jail. We were cellmates, in fact, on the Freedom Rides. And one of the things we had in common is that we had a special relationship where we would do puns. And I never forget, there in the city jail in Jackson, Mississippi, CT and I were cellmates, and we just had a ball. And I learned so much. We were still in school. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. But 24 hours we were in school because our professors were there with us. So we actually had classes. And students who were majoring in different things, they would actually set up classes. So we didn't just sit around doing time, wasting time. We were really busy. But the thing that I remember about CT and I used to do puns. And we were doing puns in jail. We were cellmates. And the jailer came up and tried to get us to come out. And CT turned around and looked at him. He said, we have to finish these puns first. Of course, the jailer didn't know what a pun was. So he didn't know what that was. So he backed off and waited until we finished our puns. And then we went to our trial. But I had many opportunities. CT and I used to have lunch together. He used to like to have soup over at 6 Feet Under there in Atlanta, Georgia. And we used to look out of the window while we were eating our, lunch. And across from the restaurant, 6 Feet Under, was a graveyard. And we never missed the opportunity to look at the graveyard while we were eating at 6 feet under. So we had that ongoing relationship. The friends who worked with like Don Rivers and people like that used to bring CT to the restaurant. So we had an opportunity to eat with him and my wife, Kate Lafayette, who's from Tuskegee. So we actually had that kind of relationship and opportunity to share with each other all along. Several things I admired by CT. One is that his way of teaching people was by example, not just giving lectures, as professors often do, but by example. His actions taught us more than his words, but he had some very powerful words. In fact, he was very musical when he talked. It was a song that he was singing. And the profound ideas and thoughts that he gave helped everybody. And when he was beaten by Jim Clark, yes, on the steps of the courthouse.
You're playing that video as we speak. Go ahead.
That one of the lessons that he taught people was that you have to learn how to come back. Even when you are attacked, you come back. Even when you are nonviolent and you have to face violence, you don't reciprocate with violence. You come back with nonviolence. And this is what CT did. And that's how he taught us, by his comeback. No matter what you believe in, when you are challenged, you don't abandon your goals. You don't abandon your methodology. You don't abandon your philosophy. And this is the way CT taught us to come back. And I never will separate from CT. As Andrew Young said, yes, we will always be together, the oneness there. And we hear CT's voice and we know what it means, because his voice and his sermons were echoes from heaven, without a doubt.
Bernard Lafayette, human rights activist. Brother, always good to see you. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts and reflections about your dear friend, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joining us right now is folks, someone who worked alongside Reverend Vivian, Diane Nash. Diane, how you doing?
Under the circumstances, it's a sad day, but other than that, I'm doing well.
Well, it is always
good to talk with you, Roland.
Indeed, it is always great to hear your voice. You, another one of our lions, somebody who has never been afraid to stand up for what's right. I started off by saying C.T. Vivian, man, he was one tough SOB. We showed that video. He got punched by Jim Clark. He did not walk away, and he stayed there resolute with conviction. Just your favorite thoughts and memories about C.T.
Okay. First of all, I want to tell you, though, you said I wasn't afraid. I was constantly. I just did what had to be done. But I was very afraid. But CT, I am so fortunate and so blessed to have had him as not only a co-worker in the civil rights movement, but also as a friend for all my adult life, really. I could call him up when I had a problem, and and he was always ready to listen and always had sage advice. But I met him in Nashville. I was a student at Fisk University, and he was at the American Baptist Seminary. Excuse me. We met at Jim Lawson's workshops. Lawson had been to India and had studied Gandhi's movement firsthand, and he was in Nashville teaching students and the community and anyone who wanted to learn really about nonviolence as Gandhi practiced it. And CT was, that's where I met CT. He was about, I guess 13 years older than I am. And the ministers who were involved were 10 and more years older. And I remember being very curious about whether they were going to put us up to doing the sit-ins and getting arrested and in trouble. And I wondered if they were going to sit in and do the same things that we were. And they did. And CT definitely did. He was in the sit-ins and later in the Freedom Ride. And he was then on SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference staff. That was Dr. King's organization. I believe he was director of affiliates because SCLC had about 50 chapters at the time. And so CT took place, he was involved in Selma, obviously, the right to vote. He was involved in the Chicago movement and was very effective in talking with the gangs and making them see that it made more sense for them to do things together to benefit the black community rather than to be fighting each other. He was active in, I think it was, I can't think, St. Augustine or Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, he was in St. Augustine. It was St. Augustine. He told me about it, and that's where a cop dropped on his back, almost drowned him in the ocean.
Exactly. Now he had. I would never have done a protest in the ocean because I don't swim well. But he survived that one, and he was someone that had no ulterior motives. So often now we run across people who take part in demonstrations and they want to be on television or they want to run for a political office or something. And CT sincerely wanted to improve society. He was smart, he was level-headed, he had integrity, he was courageous, truthful, and a wonderful preacher. And he had a great sense of humor, but when necessary, he was very no-nonsense. Mm-hmm. And he was a family man. His wife, Octavia, and he were together for a lifetime until she passed away, I think about 7 or 8 years ago. They had 6 children, and the family just always seemed to be full of love. Mm-hmm. And he was not only responsible to the society, but also to his family and friends and his personal life.
It is certainly a huge loss. It was always, I always talked about, it was great seeing him. And he was always there. In 2016, we were at the Treasury Department where they had a ceremony commemorating a plaque for the Freedmen's Bank. He was there. I think about seeing him. I'm looking at some photos from Congressional Black Caucus, Operation Hope. I remember Hank Stewart had his event in Atlanta. He was there. I mean, he was not somebody who was a homebody. He was always there and lending his support even to activists today. That's what he's been doing.
Yes, and he was active, Roland, into his 90s.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He was speaking on university campuses, and he's one of those people that I can really say the world is different and much better because he lived. He made a huge difference, and today I've been wondering how we're going to navigate this troubled world without him.
Well, Ambassador Andrew Young, who was just on a few minutes ago, this is what he said. He said, Roland, he said, we don't leave, we simply move on. The fact that we still are talking about Dr. King, still talking about Hosea Williams, still talking about those legends, he said, that's the case. So they're still with us. I think the key is for us to take the lessons that they gave us and keep applying them to present day. And then folks like you who are still in the fight, who are still battling, that's important as well. And I want you to know, and I still want to sit down and do a one-on-one with you. I did with CT, with Juanita Abernathy and others. But it's also important for us, this generation, to give proper credit and tribute to folks like you who put the work in. You said you were scared, but you were still one tough cookie. And we just appreciate your work all of these years and what you did to make it better for the next generation. Diane Nash.
Thank you so much, Roland, and I'll look forward to doing that sit-down one-on-one.
We're going to make it happen. Diane Nash, thank you so very much. I appreciate it for honoring Reverend C.T. Vivian.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Folks, this is the video that was shown when C.T. Vivian got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the White House. We want to share it with you. Coming up next, we're going to talk with Harry Belafonte, the legend himself. Here's C.T. Vivian.
I thought, unexpected, and I didn't think much about it, and I was busy one thing, the other. The closer we've gotten to it, the more exciting it has become. The more you look forward to it, the more you begin to understand the kinds of things that could come as a result of this, right? That you can do some good that it wouldn't be able to do otherwise. How it fits into your life's work, you see what I mean, is that everything that I have done and want to do, I created Upward Bound, right? Is that, and just because a lot of kids got kicked out of school because of racism, right? And I kept trying to figure how we're going to make those young people leadership for a new South. And I was with Dr. Martin Luther King, right? So what we were doing was creating a new South, huh? As a part of a whole new concept of our participation in the nation, right? And so that when you see people who are thinking like that for a lifetime, how important it is that you know that it opens doors and that people take you seriously, more seriously than they did before. It sounds so pat when you say it. But where are your values? Hold on to them, right? Go with it. There's going to be a number of things you want to do. Some of them will make you far more money, but is that what you want to do? Some of them you want to do, but you won't be able to do. Because you just don't have it, right? And then, so do what you can do and do it well. But always ask your question, is it serving people? Now, the point being is you don't have to worry about asking yourself that truthfully, because you know whether you want to help folk or not, right? And to me, that's the number one thing. If you're not changing things for the benefit of the greater society, right, then you're not about much anyway, right? At the level we're talking, if it's the level for your survival, that's another thing, right? But if you're really free enough and open enough and have opportunities enough, always think about the good it's going to do for other people, because you've already been honored, right? I don't mean by medals. You've already been honored by being in a position to help somebody, right? But if you don't get upset at seeing people hurt, suffer, put in bad situations, put in situations they're never going to get out of for the wrong reasons, if that doesn't really make you a little angry, really, right? Angry enough to do something about it, then you wouldn't think about it anyway.
Folks, joining me right now is one of my personal heroes, someone who has been a longtime freedom fighter, one of our fiercest advocates, the great Harry Belafonte. Mr. B!
Hello, baby. How are you?
Man, how you doing? Have not heard your voice in a long time.
Yeah. This is a sad time.
It is. It is.
The loss of C.T. Vivian to many of us is equal to the loss of Dr. King. He was a tremendous force for good in this country. He was one of the stalwart leaders of the movement. He committed himself in the most dignified and most passionate way to the cause of freedom, and especially among people of color. His loss is a great loss for America, and I am very saddened that we're having this discussion.
Out it that way, but people forget he was Reverend C.T. Vivian. So many of these folks were reverends as well. I mean, they were moral, spiritual leaders who were putting it all on the line.
Right. That's right. That was him. I am so sad. I feel almost as disoriented with the passing of C.T. Vivian as I did at the passing of Dr. King. He was a great, great warrior, and we shall miss him dearly, and his voice and his courage and his wisdom.
One of the things that people forget, these folks were humans. They were regular, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Beyond the fight for civil rights, how was he just as a person?
He was a man that was filled with nothing but love for the human race. His compassion and his commitment to the freedom of humanity was unequaled. I think that the loss of C.T. Vivian is something that many of us will not get over quickly.
But you know what, Mr. B? You know what, Mr. B? I think, and just as somebody who's been a journalist, for the last 20 plus years, I think part of the problem, which I think is very difficult, is that a lot of people really focus on just Dr. King or just the large figures, but they forget there were so many others who fortified them, who were part of these strategy sessions, who were involved. When you think about Diane Nash and James Bevel and Bernard Lafayette and James Orange and Hosea Williams and Septima Clark, and we could go on and on and on, that they were all giants. And it wasn't just one or two figures who somehow rose above the others.
Yes. Our movement was larger than any one personality. And although Dr. King was a leader beyond compare, one who led us beautifully to the conclusions of success that we've experienced, was not a march he held on his own. He had many powerful warriors by his side, instructing him, guiding him, giving him the benefit of their wisdom on strategy. And C.T. Vivian was a heavy, heavy player in that world. We shall miss him dearly.
Last question for you, sir. And I hate saying last question to you because I can listen to you all day. That's why I always enjoyed us getting together for lunch and dinner. He's 95. Reverend Lauer was 98. You just celebrated what, 93rd?
90s.
You say it again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many years. What do you want folk today? What do you want folk today, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, to know and understand about you and legends like Reverend Vivian and the work they put in? What do you want them to know?
I think that we must pause and accept the fact that the movement, Black Lives Matter, has stepped into the breach and is making magnificent contributions to the objectives of liberation being waged by Black people all over the world, let alone just this country. And I think that the example left by C.T. Vivian, the example left by Dr. King, the example left by Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and so many others has been an indelible part of the success of our history. And I think their passing has left a great void. But I'm convinced that the young people have gotten the message. And when I look at what's going on with Black Lives Matter, when I look at what's going on with the women's movement, what went on with the women in the global mobilization recently, I think we're on the right path. And the contribution these men and women made, the group I just mentioned, is a great gift to our cause. They shall be missed dearly.
I said this to Diane Nash. I say it to you every single time I get to see you and talk, that we owe an absolute debt of gratitude, not just for what you did, but what you continue to do. You have slowed down, but the fight is still in you. It is still there. What was passed on from you from Paul Robeson, well, you have passed on to other people. And I just want you to know, and again, I say it every time, that we appreciate you, we thank you, and we love all that you have done, all that you will continue to do. Harry Belafonte, my brother, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for continuing our struggle and bringing your voice to our cause so magnificently. We love you. Love you, love you, love you.
I appreciate it. Tell your wife hello.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks a lot. Whew. Again, folks, these are folks who I've met, I've talked to, I've interviewed, got a chance to know. And I'm telling you, just when Thurgood Marshall died, I was working at the Austin American Statesman, and I was connected with the great Barbara Jordan. And Barbara Jordan told this story. She told this story about just sitting at his feet, just sitting at his feet and learning, listening to him. And that's really what I've always enjoyed when it comes to Harry Belafonte, when it comes to Reverend C.T. Vivian, when it comes to Ambassador Andrew Young and so many others, the ability just to be in their presence and listen and learn. I guarantee you my next guest believes in that as well. John Hope Bryan is the founder of Operation Hope. He joins us right now. John, you and I knew C.T. Vivian very well. He was with you when they did the dedication of the Freedmen's Bank at the Treasury Department in January of 2016. Hell of a loss of a lion.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for doing this, Roland. I got a call from Ambassador Young just a moment ago. I said, "Why are you calling me? I'm about to go on. You got off. Now your deal's done. You want to call me and mess up my train of thought." But I try, even though he's my play father, I call him Ambassador Andrew Young. I don't call him Andy or Andrew Young. I call him Ambassador Andrew Young. I call Reverend C.T. Vivian, Reverend C.T. Vivian. I was looking at Diane Nash who, I mean, Roland, fine, smart, super intelligent, committed, could have done anything she wanted to as a young lady, was focused on this movement. Harry Belafonte, handsome, smart, charismatic, could have just gone and done Hollywood, exclusively focused on this movement. It was leaders like Dr. King and Ambassador Young and John Lewis, who was in a parallel path, but still the same movement. Dorothy Height, Reverend C.T. Vivian. Their integrity rooted everybody, right? And, everybody's been saying these real somber stories. These are very serious and understandably so. I'd like to bring a little levity to the discussion about Reverend C.T. Vivian, if you don't mind. I sent you some discreet photos while you were interviewing Mr.
Well, actually, I'm showing right now. I'm trying to see if I can pull them up. But right now, this is a photo here. This is from the dedication, the Treasury Department. You're sitting. This is the back of y'all head. So sorry. This is y'all sitting together. And then this is the photo here of the three of us having a good laugh while about to interview the two of you. And so he was a road dog for you. But go right ahead.
Yeah, so in no particular order, I'm going to tell you. So Reverend Vivian would study everything and everyone. I think Miss Nash mentioned this. And he wouldn't mess with you unless you were serious. So he wanted to make sure I was serious. And he would look at me and he'd observe. And then, I don't know what order this came from, but we started to warm the relationship up. And one day he called me out of the blue and said, I want to come see you. The legend says he wants to come see you. Just say what time.
Yeah.
What would you like? Would you like me to come to your office? No. What's your address? And he came to my home, and I think I sent you one of those photos in the library. If I didn't, I will send it to you. A candid shot. We're in the library in my house, and he said, I've read your book, this Forks of Capitalism, 3 times. You're on to something. He said, the next movement is about money and economics and poverty eradication. This is where Dr. King was going. What's the plan? I want to, Doc, he loves saying that. Doc, we got to get serious about this. Let me tell you what my ideas are here. And he laid all his thoughts out methodically. Now, he's 90. He'll be going on 96 now. I know he had to be 90, Roland, when he was having this conversation with me. Lucid, focused. He would walk at 90, 91 years old, a mile a day. This is a private doctor, Dr. Vivian. And he wanted to know what my plan was and what I was going to do about it, or was I just running my mouth? And if I was serious about it, he was going to join me and help me. And I'll tell you, I sort of had a man crush on him. And he didn't know me as long as Ambassador Young knew me, so he didn't have the context. And I hug people. If people know me, I hug you. I say I love you. I've got no problem with my manlyhood, so I tell a brother, I love you. So I went up at an event and I said, I love you, Dr. Vivian. I love you. And I kissed him on his forehead. And he gave me this look. He had never given me before. And he didn't say anything. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, either I called him or he called me. And we had a very honest relationship. So he would say, now, Doc, you told me you love me. Yeah. Well, I respect you, John, and we're good friends. And I had to remember, like, he's 90, whatever years old. I had to remember he's from another era. Right. Brothers don't say I love you to other men, and don't kiss him. And you don't kiss another man on the forehead. So I was like, yo, we're good. Like, we're good. I love you, like spiritually love you. He's like, oh, okay, we're cool. and then it was on the mission and the work. Now I don't know if he was joking because he had a wicked sense of humor, or whether he was serious, but it was real, like it was authentic, and that was him all the time. I sent you a photo of him because he was always cutting edge. I know.
So as you're talking, I just want to know, as you're talking, what I'm doing is I'm actually sending them to the iPad, and so I want to put them in a slideshow. Just so you just keep talking. I'm working over here while you talking. So go ahead.
Yeah, I sent you a photo of him looking at an iPad. I had my iPad. We're at dinner. Me, Ambassador Young, him, Don Rivers. Don Rivers is like his road dog. That was Robert. Nothing happened. Don Rivers was to Reverend C.T. Vivian, Presidential Medal of Freedom Award, and Andrew Young was to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the consigliere, the chief lieutenant, the chief strategist. Don Rivers gets no credit for all the great stuff he did. But anyway, he was there with us. And Reverend Vivian said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking at my iPad, looking at my schedule for tomorrow." He said, "Well, let me see it." And so I gave him my iPad, and there's a shot that I sent to you of him illuminated by the iPad. There's another picture I sent to you of him talking, it had to be 2 or 3 years ago, with young brothers in a group called Just Brothers here in Atlanta. Again, he's 93 years old at this point, leaning in, man, leaning in, not giving an inch, not saving a breath, giving it 100% he got. There's one shot. Now, Ambassador Young's younger than there you go. Ambassador Young's younger than C.T. Vivian, but Ambassador Young's chilling in the wheelchair, letting somebody push him in the airport going to D.C. And CT's huffing it. He's walking ahead of Ambassador Young and the aides. And CT had to be 93 at that point. That's what Secretary Jack Lew in the Treasury Department, where Secretary Lew renamed the Treasury Annex building the Freedmen's Bank building in honor of former slaves. This was something Reverend Vivian called me and said, "John, you don't realize how important," that's what we did our interview at Ebenezer Church. He said, "I don't think you realize how important this renaming of this Freedmen's Bank is." And he started talking to me about economics, about the Poor People's Campaign, Dr. King's last movement about poverty. He says, I got to be there. And we got to emphasize to the Secretary of the Treasury what needs to be done to provide access to capital for poor and struggling entrepreneurs and small business owners. This is the next movement. By the way, Roland, where are we at now? Isn't that the discussion right now? The thing that Reverend C.T. Vivian pointed to as a light on the hill. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to play something for you because I want to get your thoughts because you are. He also had a massive book project that people don't realize. This is, folks. Let me set this thing up. So just give me 1 second, guys. I want you to go to because I'm playing it on my iPad. So just give me a second. Henry, go ahead and are you seeing this? Go ahead and play this. Pull the audio, please. C.T. Vivian. That's as you see here.
So that would be an over the shoulder, basically. Of. Can I see? Yeah. And you got it on the camera? Yeah, it's on. Hey, you know that? He has his camera, which matching wise and have to.
John, what was amazing about this is, being in his house like a museum. But he had this book project, and just correct me if I'm wrong, he was trying to collect the first edition of every book published by an African American?
Yeah. One of his many projects, including outrunning me and you, probably a jogging project. This guy, I can't, that house where you saw, he would leave that house and walk a mile or two every day around that house just to keep his joints strong. I don't know many people your my age who can walk a mile or two a day. And he was 90 plus years old. Yes, he was an intellectual giant. He read one of my books 3 times before he called me. Imagine what else he read.
Right. Certainly, just an absolutely unbelievable person.
Did you get that photo of him with the iPad? I just sent it to you again.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, I do have that one. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can pull it up. Where is it? I'm looking on here. I think here it is, right here. All right, that's the photo right there.
We're at dinner, and Ambassador Young and he and I were having this thoughtful conversation. But he wanted to know he was nosy. Like, what are you doing on that iPad? Why are you not sharing it with me? And he didn't want me to tell him what was on it. He wanted to see it himself. He wanted to be part of the future in every way. And he was going to orchestrate it. Oh, here's this great shot. Oh, my God. I'm sending it to you. This is like going down memory lane, man. This guy, this is when he bogarted himself into my house, where he said, I'm coming to see you. What's your address? Now, this is a young lady stopping him outside of the Treasury Department. Again, Ambassador Young is supposedly the icon. He doesn't mind me saying this. He doesn't have a self-esteem problem. And this is a lady stopping Reverend Vivian because she was so enthralled with him. That's that's when he came to see me. And you see he's got a book in his hand. Even there, it's not my book. He pulled up another book. Sorry, that's the book that's his book that he was taking notes in.
Yeah, he was an absolutely committed learner, someone who was committed to and you had to look. Go to my opinion. The look on your face is sort of like how I was with him and how I was with Harry Belafonte. You just shut up and listen.
Just shut up and listen.
Crazy thing though, and last question for you, John. What's crazy is that we want to shut up and listen, and they want to shut up to listen.
That's right. That's right.
I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to talk. I want you to talk. They're like, no, I want to hear you.
So this is the difference between leaders today and iconic transformational leaders of the 20th century, this deep in this ethos. And we got to get people. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk. And there's no limit to what you can do when you're not concerned with who got the credit. Ambassador Andrew Young and Dr. C.T. Vivian were not trying to beat Dr. King. They weren't player hating. They weren't jealous. They weren't hogging the camera. They were there for service. They were servant leaders. And as a result of that, the world has given them everything because they wanted nothing, Roland. The world has given them everything. They didn't want for a thing. Everybody wanted to host them, toast them, give them free cars, whatever, which they would not take. I mean, there's so much I cannot tell about what Ambassador Young and C.T. Vivian did not accept that they would have personally enriched them, but did not accept because they thought it would look bad on them. They thought that poor people and other folks should get the opportunity, and so they sent it someplace else. Mm-hmm. We need today leaders like Harry Belafonte in entertainment, like Ms. Nash in the intellectual sciences and in civil society, like Reverend C.T. Vivian in the pulpit and in the streets and in the suites, and Ambassador Andrew Young in our hearts, our lives, and our homes. These are givers, man. They're not focused on what they get. They focus on what they have to give. Yep. And whatever goes around comes around. And I don't know about you, Roland, but one of my greatest blessings in the world was just being able to hang around them. The only reason I'm not entirely sad today is that Reverend Vivian was almost 96. I talked to his son, Al Vivian. He was not sad. They had made peace with it. I talked to Ambassador Young. He had lived his life. He did everything, and he's been promoted. I know he's sitting to the side of the Father right now, our Father, our God, and chilling, and asking what's my next assignment. Now we've got to honor him by getting back to work, and we're in a moment right now that's historic, and we got to not let this fall by the wayside. We all have to get to work, and we've got to do more. What you're doing here is make sure that Reverend Vivian's name is bigger in so-called death than it was in life. He is still with us. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Energy matters, and souls are forever. And he's with us forever.
Absolutely. John Hope Bryant, I certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Peace and light.
Folks, last year, Reverend Joseph Lowry had his 98th birthday celebration. Ambassador Andrew Young was there. Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. was there. And Reverend C.T. Vivian was there. Folks, this was 180 plus years of wisdom. I was the MC of the event. We live streamed this event, and we were looking for the video, could not find the video. So I hit up Cheryl Lowry, the daughter of Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry, and she got me in contact with Casey Wright, who was the videographer. And folks are obviously in front of all this, but you can see his head. You can't see Reverend Lowry, but this was Reverend C.T. Vivian celebrating his longtime friend, Reverend Joseph Lowry, on the birthday. Y'all, this was a few months ago, October 2019. Both of them are no longer with us. Watch this.
C.T. Vivian stepped over. He wanted to say a couple of words to his longtime friend, Reverend Dr. Lowry. Reverend Vivian?
Let me tell you, is that just a half a dozen of those that have been here, gone through it all, and made a clear effort of it all, and did good things for many young people, and that you don't know which is best. It's but both are good, and he's done it and continued to do it. And even when he wasn't doing it, his friends were because of him, and that's rare.
190 combined years of wisdom right here. Give it up for Reverend C.T. Vivian.
Folks, it was great to be there. One of the reasons why it's important for you to support what we do at Roland Martin Unfiltered is for moments like this. The reality is Reverend C.T. Vivian did not get his just due on the cable networks today. I haven't seen it. I don't even know if he was even mentioned on the evening newscast, but this was a giant, an absolute giant. There were some other folks who we wanted to have on. Bernice King, she had an emergency. Reverend James Lawson, who trained Reverend C.T. Vivian in the Nashville movement. We had some issues. We're going to try to get him on Monday because I really want his reflections. And so stick with us because you're about to see my one-on-one interview with C.T. Vivian's. And wait until you hear what he says about not being afraid to die. Y'all gonna be blown away. But this is why we want you to support Roland Martin Unfiltered. This is why we want you to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Nobody else is gonna do this kind of tribute. No black website. You're not gonna see this on TV One, on OWN, on BET, Her, on Clio TV, on Bounce, on Aspire. You're not gonna see this even on Revolt. You're not gonna see this. This is why we matter. This is why independent black-owned media matters. More than 5,000 of you on YouTube. Y'all can join right there. Y'all can also join us by simply our Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or send, of course, a money order to New Vision Media, Inc., NU Vision Media, Inc., 1625 K Street Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 2006.